Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the last session of Subteam 4. It's been a very productive week. This is our last day of active sessions, and I would like to thank everybody involved in the preparation of this work, both from the Forest Service, the Korean Forest Service, and other organizing colleagues. We have a very interesting session. Unfortunately, the Minister of Bhutan could not join us. He had a problem, could not leave his country. But we have the honor to have Professor Ki-Won Kim from the University of Korea to moderate this session. And with no more introductions, I give the floor to Professor Kim. Thank you.
감사합니다.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. To all of the guests who are here with us, and to those of you who are connected online via Zoom from 5 oceans and 6 continents. It's great to meet all of you. My name is Kim Ki-Won, and I'll be moderating this session. So I've been researching on forest welfare, education, healing, recreation, culture from the perspective of forest aesthetics. And I retired from Kookmin University in Seoul in August of this year. So now the 15th WFC is drawing to an end. I believe that you've gained much information to date. So you probably have too much information in your head by now, but don't worry. In this session, we will be looking into just forests for humanity and peace, which is a lighter topic. So this will be a very comfortable session. So in session 4, or in sub-theme 4, we have been confirming and revisiting the connections between forest and human health. In session 1, on the second, we looked at how forest contributes to humanity's health. In session 2, the importance of forest from the perspective of health. Session 3, we looked at how forests can guarantee our livelihood. And yesterday, we looked at the contributions of forests to social cohesion and integration. Today, in session 5, we'll be looking into what the forests can do for humanity, brotherhood, and peace. And forests provide us with a lot of cultural and spiritual benefits, forms a lot of harmony, reduces conflicts, and we'll be looking into the spiritual aspects and the philosophical significance of forest as well. And the objective of this session is to provide a common platform for indigenous peoples, experts, practitioners, and policymakers to discuss and review priorities for research, policy reform, education, and capacity building to secure the natural assets of forests for humanity and peaceful world, and it will lead to recommendations on ways forward to improve the contributions of forests to health, well-being, peace, and harmony of humanity globally. So now let's look at the different roles that forests can play for human beings. I would summarize it into 7. First, forest is where life first begins. Much life is born from the forest. From evolutionary and from creation perspective, mankind is birthed from the forest. The second role of forest is to be a cradle. It is where we grow as people. Many humanity has left forests, and we live in cities these days. However, if you look at the entire history of mankind, you will know that we've been living in forests for a long time, and this has enabled humanity to develop civilizations based on forests. And the third role of the forest is that it is a site of learning. We learn much information, knowledge from the forest. The fourth role is to be a site of work. It provides us with much work and job. And fifth, it is a resting place. Forests are sites of rest and healing and health. And sixth, it is the site of living. It provides us with food, and it is where our daily life takes place. And the seventh role of forest is our final resting place. It is a place of resting in peace. So this is our final destination. Because of these 7 roles that forest plays, humanity's life becomes possible, very prosperous and overflowing, and we can live in happiness. This is what we mean by welfare and well-being. And in that respect, humanity's well-being and welfare has begun from the forest. Don't you agree? So in sub-theme 4, this is what we hope to discuss. This is what we have been discussing. Today, on the last day, this will be a time for us to sum up what we have been discussing over the past several days. And we look forward to excellent presentations and great questions. So that has been an introduction of this session. Now let me introduce to you our speakers and panelists. As you heard earlier, originally we had the Bhutanese Minister for Agriculture and Forests of the Royal Government of Bhutan, Lyongpo Yeshe Penjo, scheduled to give the keynote speech, but he was not able to attend. And so on his behalf, I'll be giving the keynote presentation. As panelists, we have Jessica Vega Ortega, who is seated on my right side. Please welcome her with a warm hand. It's nice to meet you. And the second panelist is Mr. Mariano Castro Jimenez, and he is connected online. And next we have Dr. Ina van der Broek from the University of the West Indies in Kingston, Jamaica. She is a senior lecturer from Natural Products Institute there. And I missed one person, Ms. Elizabeth Maruma Murema from CBD, and she is connected online. Next, we also have Dr. Jude Nzizifon Kimengzi, who is the leader of the Forest Institutions and International Development Research Group from the Technical University in Dresden, Germany. Last but not least, we have Mr. Dipayan Bhattacharya, who is a Senior Program Manager of the World Food Program and Team Manager of the Food Assistance for ASET, who is also connected online. So that has been an introduction of the panelists.
And now I would like to begin my keynote address. Let me move to the podium. So today, the topic of my keynote address is Forest is Love. It's also the title of my keynote presentation. Originally, I was, as I mentioned, not the designated keynote speaker, but around 1 o'clock in the morning, I received notice, or actually I received an email that the keynote speaker will not be able to make it today. I received that email from the organizer, and so because I'm the moderator, I was given the task as keynote speaker as well. Luckily, because I speak in Korean and I can utilize simultaneous interpretation, I was able to prepare for my keynote address, and here I am speaking before you. So I ask for your understanding for speaking in Korean. As I mentioned before, I am a professor, but starting from 1992 till today, for around 30 years, I have been active in an NGO, the Forest and Culture Research Association, and also I'm a part of the Society for Forests and Culture. So, because what I do at the Society for Forests and Culture is directly linked with what is being dealt with under this session, let me introduce the activities. So if you look at the roles of the forests, you can produce forest goods and products, and also there's environmental functions, but also there's a cultural and also the artistic roles as well. Culture and arts actually leave a trace of the life of mankind, and life begins from the forest. That is why the cultural and aesthetic aspects of the forest is very important. So the Society for Forest and Culture has a long history of 30 years. Relatively speaking, it's long. We have been focusing on identifying, preserving, and recording the culture related to the forest, and we have been working towards promoting the significance, the value, and the meaning of forest to the people so that we can help the people to learn to love the forest and also partake in protecting the forest. So two of the major activities that we carry out is that we publish bi-monthly magazine Forest and Culture, and second, we actually publish books. And up till now, we have published 25 books covering the entire forest culture of Korea. It's actually a massive project, and it's about 10,000 pages in A4 size paper. So it's a large-scale project, and we're receiving the support of the KFS. Now, the main information center, I'm sure that you received the Cultural Forest in Korea booklet. We're distributing this free of charge. Have you received this? Yes. Well, this has been published by the Society for Forest and Culture, and if you have not yet received it, please go to the main information center on floor 1, and you will be able to get it. So I ask you, if you have not yet received this booklet, please go to the information center and receive it. And this concludes the introduction to the activities I take part in as part of this organization. So now I would like to talk about the basic spirit, basic ideology, and the proposition in terms of the perspective on forest. First, the basic spirit of viewing the forest. I would like to ask you, what is the most important thing in the world? It's ourselves. It's our own life. However, there is something that is more important than our own life. What do you think that is? Yes, that actually is the air, the oxygen, and the water that protects our lives. Where does that all come from? They come from the forest. The forest actually helps safeguard our lives, and that is the basic spirit of how I view the forest. Now let's talk about the basic ideology. What do you think is a forest? Let's define a forest. It's the same as defining what a tree is. Forests are where trees are gathered, where they live. And trees are the tallest, largest, and longest living things in the world. If you go to California, you will be able to find trees over 115 meters tall, weighing over 2,000 tons, and living over 5,000 years. However, it's not enough to describe trees simply as the tallest and the largest and the longest living things or living things in the world. I think that being the tallest is great, and being tallest means that these are majestic beings. Any creature that lives for more than 5,000 years is divine. And so I think that trees are divine creatures, and the adjective that we can use for trees here are divinity or divine. So, having said that, what is a forest? The forest is where the spiritual or divine trees live in, and that is why the forest is also sacred and divine, and so the forest is a sanctuary, and that is the basic ideology of the forest. In my view, forests are sacred. The forest is a holy and sacred land. And so, lastly, I would like to talk about the proposition based on this basic spirit and basic ideology that are attached to forests. If you take a look at the lives of trees and forests and the functions they play for humanity, of course, you probably know the health functions, the healing, and the well-being functions. But aside from that, there are so many different functions that have been already covered in other sessions, so I will not go into the details. However, the trees and forests provide various functions to mankind. What do you think they are? Well, trees, even when they're living or when they're dead, the trees actually give everything they possess to mankind generously. They generously give what they have. And what do that recall? It makes me recall the book that I read when I was young, The Giving Tree, written by Shel Silverstein. It really well describes the character of the tree that gives generously, and this life of devotion of trees that gives generously and cares for humans. How can we describe this? I think that this is all about love. If you have someone that you love, then probably you would not hesitate to generously give all that you have to the one that you love. Isn't that true? So I think that the trees and the forests, they actually can be expressed as love, generous love. And that is why I believe forest is love. And that is what I have found out through my many years of studying, researching, and learning about trees. So that is the proposition that I have for trees and forests. Trees and forests shows us what love is truly about. And I think that what we have to learn from forests actually is the generous, unconditional love. Forests have been providing so many things for the well-being and the health and the welfare and the peace of mankind. And that is why we can live in this green environment. So we have received so much love from the forest, and now it is time for us to give back that love to the forest. So everyone gathered here today, we have to think about the love that we have learned from forests, and now it is time to practice that love. Trees and forests are divine and sacred, and forests is love. And love brings us together. Love conquers everything. Thank you very much. So I have two hats on. I have the hat on as the keynote speaker, and now I'm going back to the hat on as a moderator. So I ask for your understanding. I'm very busy today. Now it's time to go on to listen to the panelists.
패널 분 중에
So among the 5 panelists in this session, we have one who is here on site. So first we have Ms. Jessica Vega Ortega. She's here with us in person. So now we'd like to listen to her presentation. She is the co-chair of the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus. And in her presentation today, I believe she'll be speaking in Spanish. Yes, so she'll be speaking in Spanish, and you can listen to the translation. So we'd like to invite Ms. Ortega for the presentation. Thank you very much, and I'll be giving my speech in Spanish. Thank you for the warm introduction. I would like to share with you some principles by which I hope to engage in this discussion with you. I'd like to first begin with my greetings to you and to from all of the energy and living things around us. What we hope to represent is actually the entire universe. From the land of the indigenous peoples, we gain much benefit, and many indigenous peoples live all across the Latin American region. And before I began this session, I would like to share this message with our Guatemalan friends. Today, Well, my friend is living in Imos in Guatemala. And if my friend is listening to my presentation,
네, 제가 이 키노트 스피치를 듣고 나서 정말 저한테 너무나 큰 영감을 주셨고
I do want to say that the keynote speech was very much moving for me, and I felt that I needed to change the contents of my presentation after listening to the keynote speech, which moved me a lot. For us, talking about the forest is about love. It's about energy because, as we heard earlier, forest is love because a tree, a forest, contains so many different values for us. I was very emotional, so I really apologize for that statement I just made. But I do want to talk to you from deep within my heart. The fact that in our forest, it contains the knowledge of our ancestors. In Oaxaca, there is the 2 oldest trees in the world, and these trees impart us with great affection and love. And these trees give us so many benefits as people, and it provides us with healing. It has given us a history and experience of healing. And so to us, the fact that we are talking about this topic, about forests, is something that is very urgent, very important for us because the Indian villages are faced with the challenge of having to preserve and conserve the biodiversity in our land, and at the same time, this is an effort that is directly linked to our world view as a whole. This holistic, universal perspective is what is required from all of us. Forests, trees gives us life, it gives us food and medicine and healing, and maintains our connections to our indigenous land and helps us protect our culture. Losing trees, losing rivers means that, and losing our language means that to our Indian tribes, we are losing our identity as Indian tribes. And so the keynote speech by Professor Kim really resonated with me, with all of the work that we've been doing. Everything is connected to our security, our safety and peace, and our land, and protecting this land. And this is directly connected to dignity of life. And in fact, I had prepared a different presentation, a PowerPoint. And the message that I wanted to impart through my PowerPoint was the efforts of the indigenous people, particularly the indigenous youth, and the fact that the land and the plants and the animals that live on this land, we need to gain permission from this nature, from the forest, in using the resources that they provide. This gift from land for us to gain it and to utilize it. We engage in dance and singing and ceremonies to show our respect and gratitude. And we also show affection for nature. So as Professor Kim has mentioned, humanity also has been showing affection and love to forests and land. At the Forestry Congress, I was able to witness and hear many important messages, particularly for our indigenous youth, on health and peace and on healing. We have to ensure that the youth are all involved in discussions and implementations of these values. I heard that today in Korea, this is Children's Day, and I was able to meet with many kids at the Congress as well. So these children, the young people the young generation all have to be involved in our processes. We have to ensure their participation in this process. And it is the responsibility of the adults, and ensuring that the youth participates in the process is a mission that we need to fulfill. It is our responsibility to respect the opinions of the youth and of course we have experienced much conflict to date stemming from capitalism, from climate change, environmental pollution, and these are all anthropogenic problems and issues that we face. And we still have a lack of understanding on what is the most urgent challenge that we face. So humanity is dissipating from this earth, and this problem was caused by mankind themselves. And so business as usual cannot go on. The children, the future generation, all have to be involved in creating a new process. And we have to ensure that this effort to create change must goes on and be sustainable. So that is why I have much gratitude to all of you, to the keynote speech that we heard earlier. Because this is all for not just the future generations, but this is an effort for ourselves as well. Because the future generations will learn from what we do. It's learning about trees, about how to love the land, and to respect nature. So we need to take these urgent actions to conserve our territories. And there has been much sacrifice that have allowed us to preserve the land that we live in. And through this Congress, we hopefully will be able to have a holistic perspective and approach developed. So thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you the efforts that we've been engaging in. And I tried to share some examples with you, and I hope that this Congress will allow us to share more of this energy in the future. Thank you so much.
총회에서 이렇게 에너지를 받을.
So at this Congress, we have been blessed with so many wonderful speakers, especially our speaker, Ms. Ortega, has just shed tears while she was speaking, and it's really touching. She was talking about the youth
and the benefits that the forests provide us with, and the efforts that is required to preserve this benefit from the forest, particularly the indigenous people and the indigenous communities, how they are trying to preserve and protect the forests. Those were good examples that you shared with us, so we really appreciate the presentation.
So let's go on to our second panelist, who is Mr. Mariano Castro Jimenez. I understand that there is a pre-recorded video prepared, so let us take a look.
Hello, my name is Mariano Castro Jimenez. I am a consultant for the Peace and Biodiversity Dialogue Initiative, managed by the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Before I begin, I would like to thank the audience and the organizers of this Congress for giving me the opportunity to discuss how this initiative aims to alleviate conflict and improve international relations. The Peace and Biodiversity Dialogue Initiative, from now on the PVDI, was launched by the Republic of Korea during its presidency of the 12th meeting of the Conference of the Parties of the CBD. The initiative aims to showcase the benefits of conservation to improve peace and international relations, and this is done through promoting transboundary conservation. The PVDI also supports the parties of the CBD to implement Goal 1.3 of the Program on Protected Areas and the achievement of several of the Aichi targets. Background information on the PVDI can be found on a note prepared by the Executive Secretary, which is available on the PVDI website and can be found under the reference that you can see on the first bullet. Also, as mentioned before, the Program of Work on Protected Areas, adopted in 2004, has a specific goal on strengthening transboundary protected areas and other forms of collaboration across national boundaries and improving international cooperation. And the Gangwon Declaration on Biodiversity for Sustainable Development, prepared by the Republic of Korea, that welcomes the PVDI initiative to support the work of the Convention. To have a better understanding of the scope of work of this program, I would like to go through some concepts and definitions. First, what do we understand as transboundary conservation? Experts have defined it as the process of cooperation to achieve conservation goals across one or more international boundaries. This definition covers three types of designations: transboundary protected areas, transboundary conservation landscape or seascapes, and transboundary migration conservation areas. According to the IUCN, the three of them can be designated as parks for peace or peace parks. And what is a park for peace? This is a special designation that is dedicated to the promotion, celebration, and/or commemoration of peace and cooperation. As you can see, this is a designation that can be applied throughout the different stages of the relationship between countries. There are several examples of transboundary conservation initiatives around the globe, and parks for peace as well. The Waterton Glacier International Peace Park, which is the one that you can see in your screen, is one of them. This is actually one of the first examples of transboundary conservation initiatives. It was established in 1932 by the United States of America and Canada to commemorate their peaceful relations. I must also say that this type of conservation is not free from challenges. Just as it happens with conservation areas within national borders, they also face several problems. For example, illegal activities, issues regarding to management, the lack of resources, among others. However, as you can imagine, at a transboundary level, there are other challenges that also arise. For example, different visions, political complications, defining the best models for cooperation, or even harmonizing the different legal frameworks. Acknowledging these challenges, but also the benefits of transboundary conservation for both nature and people, the PVDI has been working on achieving the following objectives. First, promoting the value of peace parks and their conservation benefits of biodiversity, especially how conservation also helps alleviating conflict. Updating information on transboundary conservation complexes, and facilitating collaboration by organizing workshops for countries and key stakeholders. For example, in previous years, the PVDI has organized side events at conferences of the parties of the CBD. Another objective is to facilitate the creation of new transboundary initiatives with peace elements and strengthening existing ones. For this, we have carried out surveys and identified the status of peace elements in transboundary conservation areas. We are also focused on disseminating best practices, guidelines, and facilitating the exchange of data, information, and resources. For example, on previous years, the PVDI has organized capacity building activities for specific regions, facilitated massive open online courses on peace park development and management, and several other resources that are available on our website. Before I finish, I would like to share with you this quote from someone that I greatly admire and who's also one of the founders of the Peace Park Foundation. Nelson Mandela said the following words: "I know of no political movement, no philosophy, and no ideology which does not agree with the Peace Park concept as we see it going into fruition today. It is a concept that can be embraced by all. In a world beset by conflict and division, peace is one of the cornerstones of the future. Peace parks are building blocks in this process, not only in our region, but potentially the entire world." And here, I would like to add that although transboundary conservation per se is not the sole solution to alleviate conflicts, it can definitely be seen as an important instrument that can facilitate the improvement and consolidation of international relations between countries by working together to achieve a common objective, protecting life on Earth. Here, I conclude with my presentation. Thank you for your attention and for the opportunity to share the work and objectives of the Peace and Biodiversity Dialogue Initiative with you. I would also like to take this opportunity to make an invitation to contribute and participate to help facilitate the achievement of this important initiative. More information is also available at our website. In addition, if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to contact us.
네, 감사합니다. 히메네.
Yes, thank you very much. We just heard from Mr. Jimenez. And so the PBDI, the Peace and Biodiversity Dialogue Initiative, is what he leads as a consultant. He introduced the organization and also the activities, in particular, the Parks for Peace, the role that the parks can play in terms of alleviating the confrontation. He said that this was not a silver bullet, but it can definitely play a role in improving the outcomes. And so thank you very much. Let's go on to the third panelist.
보로에
Next, I would like to invite Dr. Ina van der Broek, who is a senior lecturer of the Natural Products Institute at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. She's also an ethnobotanist. So Dr. van der Broek, your presentation, please.
Thank you very much. A very good afternoon to everyone in the Republic of Korea and to everyone around the world, and many greetings from Jamaica. I'm an ethnobotanist at University of the West Indies, Mona campus. It's really an honor to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me to the session about forests for humanity and peace. My contribution intends to bring a Caribbean perspective to the dialogue about forests for local and transnational health and cultural well-being. Next slide, please. The Caribbean island region is wedged between North and South America, as you can see on this map. Perhaps this region is most famous as a tourist destination of sun, sea, and beach. However, it's also an important biodiversity hotspot with a high percentage of endemic plants that occur nowhere else on our planet, as you can see on the graph on the top left corner. At the same time, the Caribbean region contains many habitats that are vulnerable to degradation and deforestation, including forested mountain regions. I think that somebody is saying that they're not seeing my slides. I am seeing them. Next slide, please. For example, the Caribbean island of Jamaica was named Jaimaka by its original inhabitants, the Taino, an Arawak group of indigenous peoples. Jaimaka means land of wood and water, a name that refers directly to its forest. The island harbors 3,218 seed plants, of which 1/3 occur only in Jamaica. More than half of Jamaica's land area, 55% to be precise, consists of forest, with 14% of those being primary forest or broadleaf forest. In this picture, you see the primary forest of the Blue and John Crom Mountains in eastern Jamaica, which I will use as a Caribbean case study. Next slide. The Blue and John Crom Mountains are a large protected area with primary and secondary forests. Excuse me, organizers, people are putting in the chat that they are not seeing my presentation, my slides. Shall I continue? All right, can you go back one slide, please? So the Blue and John Crow Mountains are a large protected area with primary and secondary forests. The buffer zone of these mountains is home to communities of Afro-descendant family farmers who practice subsistence hillside farming. The forests of the Blue and John Crow Mountains are spaces that community members intimately know and that they access often, and on which they depend for their livelihoods. Next slide. So they know how to read the green, and they know which plants in the forest provide them with fresh beverage. Next slide. Are with wild harvested foods. Next slide. The forest also allows them to practice agroforestry with mixed cropping. Next slide. And to produce charcoal for cooking, hereby enhancing family food security. Next slide. Also, the forest holds space for spiritual well-being, and a tree such as this species of ficus plays an important role in rituals that mitigate social conflict. Next slide. But beyond the individual trees, the forest as a landscape is home to communities of Maroon freedom fighters who actively resisted slavery during Jamaica's history and who successfully fought against the island's colonizers in the past. This happened here in this forest. This is why today the Blue and John Crow Mountains are also recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Next slide. This forest, as well as other forests throughout Jamaica, contribute to income generation for community members who collect lianas and their roots. Next slide. As well as the bark of forest trees of at least 80 different forest species of plants. Here on this map, you see we collaborated with communities across several sites in Jamaica, and we conducted interviews and identified the plant species that were used as non-timber forest products. Next slide. To prepare a fermented beverage. This beverage is called Rootonix, and it is perceived as a symbol of Jamaican cultural heritage that provides health and strength to the human body, and that also relaxes the mind. Jamaicans consider these forests to be places where the strongest plants grow in a natural, pollution-free environment, and that these characteristics of strength, of nature, and of being natural can be transferred to the human body by drinking this beverage. Next slide. The impact of these forests extends far beyond their physical boundaries, since they connect rural areas with national urban markets. For example, in the capital of Kingston, where wild harvested forest plants are sold. Next slide. There is also a direct connection with the Caribbean diaspora in New York City. Next slide. Where diaspora members import raw plant material from Jamaica to prepare officially labeled root tonics, and they sell these tonics as a health and heritage drink within their communities in the 5 boroughs of New York City and beyond across the US. Next slide. In summary, the forest directly connects nature and culture, and this relationship can be best understood as biocultural diversity, which represents the diversity of life. This biocultural diversity is at the center of multiple sustainable development goals, including good health and well-being, which is the focus of today's sub-theme. Next slide. My final slide shows a picture of a community member harvesting the bark of a tree that is not only endemic to Jamaica, but is only restricted to the primary forest of the John Crow Mountains. The use of this bark as a spice ingredient may well predate the earliest written records that we have access to. However, it's very important for us to keep in mind that survival of this cultural use depends on the continued survival of the forest as an ecosystem and as a cradle of biocultural heritage. I thank you very much for your attention.
감사합니다.
Thank you so much. Professor Van de Broek, thank you so much for citing very good examples about how the forest leads to income creation, but it doesn't just stop there. The forest connects the rural and these urban areas, and it connects countries with the world, and it also contributes to easing conflicts among people. So we really appreciate your presentation.
모시겠습니다.
Let's go on to our fourth panelist, and Hugh Nufon Kim Meng-si, Dr. Kim Meng-si, who is with the Technic University of Dresden, Germany. He is a group leader of FFID Research Group. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon to you over there in Seoul, and greetings to all panelists and attendees. My name is Jude Kim Meng-si, and I will be pitching what I call a research idea titled Pandemics and Forest-Linked Institutional Change in the Global South. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak at this very great event, and I really like the sub-team Forest and Human Health revisiting the connections. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to start, perhaps it's important to note that there is a global rapid transformation of forest landscapes today, and some estimates put it at about 12 million hectares of forest, which is lost annually. And the literature also argues that these changes, this transformation, of course, could also trigger future pandemics. And studies also say there's a possibility that the next set of pandemics might surpass the scale that we've known as far as the COVID-19 is concerned. But then I think literature also clearly establishes that we've had different other health-related issues, some linked to human-wildlife interaction. But I think we also need further knowledge and practice on pandemic prevention if there are already signals that the next scale of future pandemics might surpass the scale that we've known as far as the COVID-19 is concerned. But in this case, my contribution comes more from an institutional angle. So we try to dig into the question, what will happen or what happened during previous pandemics, and how the forest-linked institutions change. Were there some short-term, medium-term, or long-term effects that we should expect as far as institutional arrangements are concerned? Next slide, please. But before I move into the core of it, it's important to also talk a bit about some of the ways in which national governments can contribute, especially through policy. And from here, the submission is that national governments, based on the lessons learned, especially with the COVID-19, there is a need to start thinking about promoting research and practice that will lead to the development of what I call pandemic resilient institutions. And this, of course, means national governments have to start thinking about more coherent and preemptive institutional arrangements. National governments, of course, have to still further intensify the need to link different sectors as much as possible, and also to foster community-based actions and partnerships in the good to secure a livelihood. Sometimes human environment interrelationships could lead to the spread of these pandemics. There is a need to start thinking about livelihood strategies or livelihood approaches that might not propagate these pandemics. And with all the stress, the depression, and other things created by the global COVID-19 pandemic, it is imperative to start thinking more about the non-use values, especially the benefits that humanity could get, especially mental, spiritual benefits from the forest. I think mental health today is very much important. So national governments have, therefore, this role to contribute in this regard. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I pitch the project idea, which I call the PANIFOL project. And the aim, it's actually a project that is, we are still developing it. The aim is actually to contribute by providing evidence in different parts of the global south on how the pandemic might have affected forest-linked institutional arrangements. And to do that, we first want to understand the way people, for instance, in parts of Africa, in parts of Asia, and in parts of Latin America, how they perceive the triggers of these pandemics. People around forest communities, how do they perceive this, the triggers of pandemics? And we are also interested to understand the potential role this pandemic as a shock, so to speak, is reshaping institutional arrangements in these diverse contexts. And with the lessons that we will derive from parts of Africa, parts of Asia, and parts of Latin America, our next step will be to then provide insights on how
멈췄을까요?
Has he frozen? Is there a technical issue here?
김영재? 통신이 끊겼.
I think he's been cut off, perhaps. Okay, so organizers, can you please check? Has he been, he's disconnected, unfortunately. So the organizers, if you believe that it's difficult to reconnect him, perhaps it might be better to have the next panelist speak first. Can you make a decision? Is it okay? Okay, then let us wait. Yes, let's go on to the next panelist first. Thank you.
The next panelist will be connecting with Dr. Ju Kim-Eng-si in a short while.
A little connection problem. But I'm in now. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay.
Yes, so this, the project is informed by, sorry about the technical issue I had from my side. And so the project is informed by 3 interlinked frameworks. We are looking at the eco-health theory, we are looking at the sustainable livelihoods framework, and we are also looking at critical institutionalism as an emerging field of research in the broader field of institutionalism. So we draw from these frameworks to support the research that will be carried out by our master's students and also our doctoral candidates. Next slide, please. And so in the Global South, we are targeting Cameroon as a case from Africa. We are targeting Ecuador as a case from Latin America, and we are targeting Nepal as a case from Asia. And of course, this falls within the partner networks that we have in the FEED research group at the TU Dresden. Next slide, please. So we draw mostly from very qualitative, but also quantitative approaches to be able to analyze the data we generate from for objectives 1, objective 2, and objective 3 as earlier presented. Next slide, please. And so this is our preliminary position. The preliminary position we are taking is that locational diversity in the perceived triggers of pandemics, for instance, COVID-19, around forest communities of the Global South should be expected. And the second position is that we should expect more medium and long-term institutional changes triggered by the pandemic. And based on the structure process dimension of institutions, our third position is that the process-linked changes should be prioritized over structural ones during pandemic resilient institutional theory and practice building. Next slide, please. So thank you very much for your keen attention. Again, it's a pleasure to speak at this very important event. Thank you very much.
네, 감사합니다.
Yes, thank you very much. So he talked about how when pandemics arise, how we can look at the roles of the government, for example, and the approaches that is required. And that's some of the aspects that we touched by the product that he mentioned.
Last but not least, we'd like to invite Mr. Dipayan Bhattacharya for the panel presentation. Dr. Bhattacharya, please go ahead.
Thank you. A very good afternoon to all the panelists and other distinguished delegates who are joining from Seoul, and also all other co-panelists joining from the other parts of the world. So a good afternoon and good morning to everyone. My presentation would take you to a very specific place in Bangladesh. The place is called Cox's Bazar. And I would be talking about a slightly different issue, a challenge that is about a sudden influx of about 1 million refugees who came to Bangladesh from across the border, Myanmar. And this initiative is basically what we call integrated reforestation, was a joint initiative, though I'm presenting it on behalf of World Food Programme, but it was not an effort just by World Food Programme alone. It was through a very, very effective partnership with the government of Bangladesh, FAO, IOM, UNHCR, and a host of other national and international NGOs. Next slide, please. So I would like to introduce you to two personalities. One is Hassan, who is one of the 1 million refugees who came, as I mentioned, from Myanmar, and currently living in one of the densely populated and largest refugee camps in the world, which is in Cox's Bazar. And the other person is Hasina Begum, who, along with maybe 400,000 other Bangladeshis, welcomed these refugees with open arms, and shared their food, their space, everything, so that they can live in harmony together. But gradually, they also started experiencing some potential conflicts as well, and I will come to that soon. But what happened in terms of environment and forest is that this sudden influx of refugees, started to have massive deforestation, which was of an unprecedented level of pace in terms of deforestation that already made, made an already fragile landscape into, more and more barren areas exposed to rainfall triggered landslides, flash floods, loss of significant ecosystem services. And all these things were happening. And as a result, more than 8 400,000 acres of forests were already lost by, say, early part of 2018. The next slide, please. In 2017, FAO and IOM, they undertook a study to understand the level of deforestation that was happening as a result of this influx, because these refugees, they need fuel wood to cook their food, also to build their small huts, etc. And the study found out that, and came to a conclusion that if that rate of deforestation continued unabated, by 2019, that entire area will be devoid of forests. So which would have significant environmental, social, economic impact, on the local population. There was a significant gap in terms of annual demand as well as supply, because these forests were serving about 400,000 people before this sudden influx of refugees. So what happened was that this gradually was becoming a potential for significant conflict between the refugees and the local communities who live there. Next slide, please. So we came up with this integrated reforestation effort. The name of the project is called Safe Access to Fuel and Energy, SAFE in short. That was kind of a joint initiative led by FAO along with WFP, IOM, Government of Bangladesh, UNHCR, and few others. So what was considered as a part of this, mainly from the rehabilitation of degraded land, was plantation that would build a combination of wide range of species, which was grass, leguminous seeds, bamboos, and indigenous trees. So a number of interventions were proposed along with the reforestation for reclaiming the landscape and restoring the lost resources and ecosystems. And what happened was that along with this reforestation effort, understanding that these huge populations still need fuel to cook their food, we started providing LPG cylinders to them. Every month, a voucher equivalent of one cylinder was uploaded into the smart card of which was given to all these refugee households and also some local population. And then they would go with their smart card to the nearby LPG dealer so that they can get their entitlement from them. And they would use that to cook their food. Next slide, please. So this, talking about once again the plantation side of this initiative, it basically had 5 interrelated protection, stabilization, erosion control, and also institutional and homestead plantation as a part of this comprehensive plan. The first one is the riparian protection that was essential. First, to protect all the water bodies, the drainage, river banks, etc., so that there is a natural filtration process that could be introduced. In the backdrop of this slide, you can see the barren land. So this was captured in early 2018. The next part of the strategy was slope stabilization, because this was not a flat area with undulating surface. So what we proposed was planting mixed vegetation on slopes for 0 to 30 degrees, and also a combination of mechanical land stabilization and biological land stabilization for areas having more than 30 degrees of slope. We did also, because a lot of roads were constructed for connectivity, so roadside erosion control also was extremely important as one of the strategies. So we have done that. We have been doing that in terms of harmonization of soil stabilization effort that would prevent soil erosion and loss and reduce airborne particle pollution as well. The fourth strategy was windbreak plantation. This area is not very far from the Bay of Bengal, and as a result, it really receives a significant number of cyclones and very strong winds. So the windbreak plantation is also part of that comprehensive plan. And the fifth one is institutional and homestead planting, for which we provided plantation materials, saplings to all the families, and so that they could grow plants, mostly the vegetable crop plants, around their homestead. Next slide, please. So what we have accomplished till now, you can see the image, the two images. One is in completely barren land, and then the regreening effort that we have managed to accomplish till 2021. So we sat with the communities and really adopted a participatory approach. We sat with both the refugees and the local communities separately, together with women, with youth, and came up with site-specific plans for plantation. With the technical support from FAO, WFP raised plantations, in the degraded land, with, as I mentioned, with grass, with legumes, with different kinds of trees having, a shorter maturity to the trees that can provide benefits in the longer term. And all these things were done by adopting what we call Miyawaki approach. Next slide, please. The Miyawaki approach is nothing but where we basically harness the indigenous knowledge, the local knowledge, and local species and varieties that are available, across four categories: the main tree species, subspecies, shrubs, and the ground covering herbs that could lead to the rapid restoration of the local ecosystem. FAO also brought in a lot of innovative practices which are based on local knowledge, once again, mostly by introducing earthen cocoons, watering, applied biochar, so that the environmental degradation could be addressed by sprinkling the biochar on the soil, cocoa peat, water hyacinth that can also conserve the moisture, so that the plantation activities can be undertaken year round. And as a result of that, in certain sites, the sapling survival rate was as high as 100%. Overall, an independent study found that the sapling seedling survival rate was as high as 80%. Next slide, please. So I've talked about the survival rate. As you can see on the image on your right, there is both. These are more than 30% slope areas with more than 30% slope. So we have used bamboos as a mechanical way to really control the soil erosion, and of course grass and various other kinds of plantations around it. In 2019, IUCN and UNHCR undertook a study to understand the impact of the regreening initiative. And what it found was that as a result of this really concerted effort, there is 80% reduction in the demand for firewood by the Rohingya households in the camps, and which has resulted in a significant reduction in carbon emission, as high as almost 660 million tons of carbon dioxide have been successfully sequestered, just by 2019 as a result of this. And now even, that value would be much, much higher. So it really shows that if we right from the beginning, think about these elements, that what a sudden influx of any population, be it refugee or internally displaced population, can come into a very, very confined area, it can really destabilize the local environment, because they need for their survival fuel wood and other things from the forests. So we need to really, and that can trigger, and that can become a point of, social tension. It can lead to violence. So this effort really was a peace and conflict sensitive collaboration and project and intervention that we have been undertaking. And so far the results have been really very, very positive as a result of this collective effort. So thank you very much. Back to you, Professor.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you so much. So that was a very good example of the influx of refugees and how we can restore this area that has been devastated. And so the speaker talked about a lot of different benefits that the forest gives us. But one good thing about forest is that there is irreversibility to the resources that the forest can provide us. However, if we use the forest to an extent that the forest loses this reversible capacity, then that's going to be a great problem. So thank you very much for the great presentation. So we've listened to 5 panelists give their presentations. We have about 10 minutes remaining for this session, and we'll be taking questions from the floor and listen to the answers from our panelists, and I'll be giving my summary and conclusion before we end. We don't have much time remaining, and so we'd like to begin with questions from the floor. Any questions? Any clarifications that the audience here you would like to make? If you have any, please identify yourself, your affiliation, and designate to which panelist you are asking your question. So we'll take the first question.
마이크 좀 갖다 주시죠.
Please use the microphone. Can you hand over the microphone?
Good afternoon. This is Giovanni from the Philippines. May I ask a question to the with regards to the peace parks? How are the peace parks established? And if these peace parks coincide with indigenous peoples' territories, what is the extent of the role of indigenous communities in case these peace parks are overlapped with indigenous territories? Thank you.
네, 감사합니다.
Yes, thank you very much. So can we have Mr. Jimenez answer this question about the Parks for Peace or the peace parks? He's just curious about how the parks are established and what happens if it overlaps with the land of the indigenous.
You hear me well?
네. 네.
Well, thank you very much for your question. I guess that the way to respond this is that protected areas are established according to national legislations. So there's not like international regulatory receipt of how everything should be established, but it should follow like the internal procedures in order to do it. However, as mentioned during my presentation, the whole essence of these kinds of protected areas is that they're transboundary. So in order to act, like in order to define it as a peace park, it should have the peace element between in a cross-border region. And regarding your other question, yes, of course, that's something very important that needs to be taken into consideration. But then again, that is something that should be established between the countries that decide to establish a new peace park, for example. I'm sorry if my answer is not as clear or as exact or precise as you would like to, but then we will have to analyze case by case. I wouldn't like to go any further into details, but for example, as I mentioned during my presentation as well, peace parks can be established within different stages of the relationship between countries. So there's no like, how would you put it? You could have different situations in which they're established. So they would have to be defined according to each scenario. Again, sorry if you would like to have like a more accurate answer to any particular case, but I believe that the right answer should be defined according to a case by case scenario.
Yes, thank you very much. So do we have any further questions? Anyone else?
네, 여기 질문.
Yes, your question, please.
Better I take it. So, thank you very much. I don't really have a question, or not a specific at the moment, but I have an offer and an invitation to announce. My name is Bernd Unger. I'm the chair of the Forest Interest Group of the Environmental Peacebuilding Association. And I would like to use this opportunity to link your work with all the presentators with the Environmental Peacebuilding Association. And just to make this announcement, I took the words. Thank you very much.
아주 좋은.
Yes, that's a very good proposal. Thank you so much. So we have many participants who are connected online. And as you know, in the Korean Peninsula, we are divided into North and South Koreas. And there is the truce line that divides our two countries. And we've been working very hard to establish a peace park in this DMZ area, or demilitarized zone. Unfortunately, we have not seen any concrete results yet. So in areas where a peace park is planned to be established between different countries, in a location that is between different countries, it may be very difficult. So any other question?
지금
So as you can make proposals, as we've just heard, or if you have any questions, feel free to raise your questions. You do not have any questions, it seems. Perhaps you're a bit tired from the long day. So perhaps our panelists who are joining us online, or Ms. Ortega, who is here with us in person, are there any words that you would like to add? No? Then I would like to make the closing remarks.
야.
I will briefly summarize our session and give a few proposals before we conclude. We've had 6 speakers, including myself, and we've heard a lot of different ideas and opinions. And I try to present a perspective in terms of discussing this topic. And the 5 panelists gave us their specific examples based on their past experience and the knowledge that they have gained. Forest is actually a very diverse resource. And so based on the presentations that we heard today, forests entail a lot of different challenges as well. So as we heard in the earlier example, that when there's a huge influx of refugees, for example, they would be camped usually in the rural areas near the forests. And this results in a lot of the forest damage and devastation oftentimes. Also, as you know well, forest is connected to various aspects of human life. Living a happy, healthy life, to do that in the field of medicine and health, forests have to be considered as an important element also. Forests seem to be located very far away from where people live. However, a lot of the forest products are being utilized to connect the rural areas and the urban areas, to connect that country with other country, to connect the international community. And forests connect us all physically, but also sometimes it can lead to conflicts, but also be a source of easing those conflicts at the same time. So in that respect, we had looked at what the forest can do for humanity and peace. So there was a discussion which really contributed to enhancing our understanding of this important topic. I would like to summarize the discussion today into 6 different ideas. The first is that there are a lot of health, well-being, welfare, and other social, cultural, and spiritual value contained in forests. So it's important for us to identify and explore these values of the forest. And this requires a lot of connections and cooperation among the different stakeholders. So let us engage in this effort to develop and identify these values of forest together. Secondly, there needs to be a support system for the different agencies in their effort for forests. A lot of international organizations and local organizations have been mentioned. So there needs to be continued support to these agencies and organizations. And another aspect is that we need to encourage the participation of the constituents of society. So let us promote the social constituents' participation in these forest-related processes. And fourth is that we need to encourage scientific research on health, well-being, welfare, and other aspects of forests. You may say that, well, we are so caught up in living our daily lives, livelihood, that it's difficult for us to think about scientific research. But I believe that this is a must. And the fifth point is that we need international networking. So all of the panelists here in this session, you need to continue on with this networking and exchange efforts, because that is going to contribute greatly to the area of forests. And last but not least, the lessons that the forests give us. The teaching of the forest is to carry out our actions of affection and love. So we need some kind of a campaign to ensure that these benefits and value of forests will be taught and spread throughout the world. FAO, which is the organizer of this session, hopefully we'll be taking note of these important points that we have discussed through this session. So in session 5, we looked at forests for humanity and peace. That was our discussion topic. You probably know the Scottish U.S. father of national parks, John Muir, has said,
into the universe is through forest wilderness. And into the forest I go to lose my mind and find my soul. 그렇습니다.
So that is right. It is the forest that cleanses of our mind and our soul and gives us peace. So we have to love the forests more. And Wangari Maathai was able to plant 45 million trees. 45 million. So why is it that she planted all these trees? Is this just for greening our land? Well, yes, that's partly true. But if you read the book that she's written, she says that planting trees is for mankind's soul. It is for the soul of people. Because when people's soul is polluted, we cannot love other people. We cannot love nature. And so for the soul of mankind, it's important that we plant trees, according to Wangari Maathai. And we are living in the pandemic era right now, and there's the global pandemic expert, Yona Mayet, Professor Yona Mayet, and the professor has said that we are suffering from these communicable diseases such as COVID-19 because the viruses which used to live just in nature had lost their natural environment, and so they transferred to the human world, and it is causing a lot of these pandemics and epidemics among people, society. And so to reduce these communicable diseases, we need to restore the forests. So a life of well-being, a life of health can be ensured through forests, because forests contribute to removing these diseases. And Martin Luther King Rousseau, during the last stage of his life, had focused on studying the plants. And why was it that he focused on plants? He realized that if you remain in nature, you don't need any medicine. So to live a well-being and healthy life, we need the forests. Globally, people are interested in living a long, healthy life. And so to have or enjoy such a life, we have to think about what we should do about the forests. Martin Luther King said, "I have a dream." Yes, and we agree. We have a dream also. We have a dream for the forests, at the forests, with the forests. We want to be in the forest to clean our souls, to improve our thoughts, to have more brotherhood and affection for mankind, to enjoy peace. The slogan of the 15th World Forestry Congress is building a green, healthy, and resilient future with forests. And this requires a lot of effort on our part. So this pale blue dot, which is the earth that we are living on, we have to ensure that the earth will be a planet full of mankind, humanity, and peace. Today is the 100th anniversary of Children's Day in Korea, and today is also the entry point to summer. And we'll be seeing greener forests with more birth happening. And with this, we'd like to conclude this session. To all the panelists, to all the participants, thank you so much.
Please go home in warm and peaceful heart, filled with love of forests and the green forest of May this month of Korea as an unforgettable memory. 대단히 감사합니다.